Hello all, this is Dr. Dave Maslock talking about reciprocity.com, the sharing economy proofreading platform that I'm trying to build. The E is spelled with a 3. In this particular video, I wanted to talk about whether it's time to rethink the patenting system and what are some issues with the patenting system. So I actually wanted to, first of all, explain to you what is a patent and then get into what is a patenting system supposed to do. And then after that, get into, what are some common problems with the patenting system and maybe some other ways that we can encourage and develop innovation in a different way. So first of all, I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship at a large state institution in Florida, and it's something that I've been thinking about for a while. And a lot of this is based on the current literature and the way that things are moving with innovation at this moment and what we know about innovation. And so there's some really cool things that are happening with that. So first of all, what is a patent, right? So a patent is some sort of temporary right that is granted onto a particular individual by a specific government. It changes from each region, from each country to country. You can get granted a patent from each one of these different countries, right? And it depends on the country, but usually it's about 20 years in length. How long you're actually granted this temporary monopoly, which means that you have the sole use and proprietary use of developing and using that particular intellectual property. It's usually a design, some sort of set of instructions or a contract or something like that sort of details all of the ways to both manufacture and actually after that to produce that particular innovation, right? Whatever you have created, that product that you have created. Now, the reason why the patenting system was originally designed, it was to actually encourage people to innovate, right? So if you have this temporary monopoly on intellectual property, it encourages you to innovate because you think that you're going to be profitable. You're going to make some money off this particular innovation. And then after that, what's cool is that after that certain amount of time that it's done, it is design's put into the public domain. Anybody can use it. Anybody can develop it, right? So this is often what we think about with patents or generic drugs, for example. These are usually after patents have expired and generic pharmaceuticals will come out and produce them. And the cost is substantially cheaper because they don't have to pay the royalties to the individual who designed it or the company that's actually designed that particular innovation, that particular pharmaceutical, right? So there is tremendous amount of benefit and tremendous amount of argument for having patents. And I'm not suggesting that we should get rid of patents altogether, but there are some sort of interesting problems that we actually have to sort through and think about as people that are developing the patenting system. And the USPTO, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, they're pretty aware of this kind of stuff, and it's not anything new, but I thought I should put a video out there in how we can think about this. There's some problems that we generally have with the patenting system. The first particular problem is that, patents are costly. So generally, most people don't recoup the cost of when they create an innovation, they put in a patent, they're never going to recoup those costs. It's very costly, and you actually generally don't profit from patents. The reason why people actually might patent and continue to hold on to a patent, you have to renew that every 2 or 3 years. You have to renew your patent application, which is a fraction of the cost of actually submitting and doing it. But you have to renew it, and I think the reason why most people actually renew it, or what the general belief that the reason why people renew it is because they have an expectation that at some point that patent is going to become useful, and people are actually going to want it, and then they're going to get royalties for it. So people continue to renew that particular patent. The thing is that yes, it's very costly to get a patent out there, right? You could do it yourself. I'm not suggesting that is a problem. You can go out and do it yourself. The problem is you don't know the law behind there, and that's why we have patent lawyers. And I'd encourage you, if you're thinking about doing a patent and going about that route, don't take my word for it. Go and see a patent lawyer and ask them what they think and whether something's actually patentable. The issue is it's going to be very costly doing that. It's expensive, right? to go through and get a patent is extremely expensive, not in the actual application. I forget what the exact amount is, but it's not a lot to actually go through the application process. You might be out a couple $1,000. Geez, I wish I knew at the top of my head, but somebody will comment at one point and let us know. The major cost is actually getting that patent lawyer to go through all the process and do all the patent citations. They have to go and look up and cite other people's patents that have actually, it's called prior art. You have to go and look up what other people have done in the past and cite those other people. And that's kind of the way it builds. It's kind of like if you imagine a list of references at the end of a paper that you wrote. That's exactly what you're trying to do with prior art, and that's what patent lawyers typically do. And they also know how to design and build an argument for that particular patent to make sure it's defensible if there's any litigation. So that is a small portion of the cost. The major portion of the cost of patenting is not necessarily the application component and getting the lawyers. It's actually a litigating after it, right? And this is the problem with small producers or people that are actually innovators. They might not actually decide to patent because they know they're not going to have the money to respond to any particular patent litigation that comes their way, or if somebody steals their idea, it's not going to be worth it. If they have a couple of patents or a single patent, it's not going to be really all that worth it for them to defend that particular patent. What they can do, because it's so costly to defend it, particularly if there's a large organization that can appropriate that patent and just continue to work along. What they can do is give it to certain lawyers that will actually, or litigators that will actually defend it, but at the same time you're giving away a substantial amount of the value of that patent to the lawyers to litigate on behalf of you, and that is somewhat problematic. You could actually, you have one or two choices. You can actually find a litigator that will take a portion if they win, or you can go and give this patent for a certain price to the litigators or a group of litigators that will actually defend it. They'll pay you for your patent and they'll defend it on your behalf. It's, either way, you're not getting a lot out of it, and it's often not worth your time to go through that particular process, right? So it's pretty costly, and a lot of people are just like, nah, it's not worth my time to go through that process, and that's true. The other thing that patenting doesn't necessarily explicitly address, and this is somewhat of a problem with this, is that free disclosure of innovations and innovative designs actually has a lot of benefits that are implicit other than the sort of direct sort of profiting benefit that you actually get from freely disclosing the particular innovation that you have. Right, so going through the patent route, you might, and that's kind of like a hoarding mentality instead of thinking about an abundance mentality, which is often what the free disclosure is. And what you're trying to do with the abundance mentality is thinking about how you can actually benefit in terms of reputation from this. So if you freely disclose and you keep freely disclosing and you keep freely disclosing and you show yourself that you're actually show others that you're an innovator and you're interesting and you have all of this stuff that you're working on and blah, 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 just it's a huge thing that you're working on, you're continuously innovating, pretty soon you can dominate a particular industry or you can dominate a sector because you're the person that's being the most helpful. And you're the person that is helping so many other people, and they end up coming and referring to you. And then there's other ways that you can profit from that, right? So this is why it's implicit, is that you can profit from maybe consulting services, maybe that there is, eventually you can hire out yourself in other ways, or maybe you can teach courses, or all this kind of other stuff that's out there that you can possibly do and benefit from that. You might get a job offer from, say, if you're a developer, for example, you can get a job offer from Google, which would be really cool, right? If they're hunting you down to get you to go on and work for them, that means that you're in high demand, right? So that's what you want to think about. The other thing that we often ignore, right? So the patenting system ignores completely the distribution and the adoption of a innovation. And this part is actually often the trickiest, right? So the actual developing and getting the thing developed and making it is only a small portion of actually the value of an innovation. The larger portion, and most larger portions, actually comes from having a large installed base, having a lot of people actually using that particular innovation. And the more people that are using that particular thing, the better it is, and the more that one person can prosper from that, right? Or a group, and many people can prosper from that particular thing, because you're giving it away and allowing other people to use it. So the more that you get other people to use it, the more that it easily becomes adopted, and the easier it is for you to appropriate some of the rents that are generated, some of the profits that are generated from that particular innovation. That's the one thing that's critical that we often forget, right? And then there's a third thing that we often forget, and it's more of a general trend that's happening at this moment, and it's a serious big trend that's happening in innovation. And that is, innovation is moving away from sort of a producer-manufacturer type model, where only the producer or manufacturer actually develops some sort of innovation, to much more towards like sole innovator, user innovator type models, and to like open collaborative type innovation models. These are kind of like different things. So the producer manufacturer is basically like a firm, a company that's actually going to build and develop this particular innovation, right? So they're putting it all together, and they're designing it. And now you just imagine how this actually works, right? So you can imagine that there's 10 people in a garage, they're putting it all together, and blah blah blah, doing all that kind of stuff. That is one way, and that really works great with a patenting system. But then there's other ways, right? So the user innovation, this is the one where somebody is working with the tool, and they figure out that this tool doesn't work with how they're actually working it, so they tweak it. And then that tweak, they can actually give back to the user and say, or to the developer, the person that actually made it, and said, hey, this is really cool. What if you did this? And that actually benefits the developer, right? So to do all those little stages along the way, the user might suggest that, and the user can actually go and develop their own product at the same time, but that's tweaked, and it kind of changes that way. But that is really difficult and costly to go through the patenting system, to go through that entire process where, there's a negotiation and blah, blah, blah. It's just really tricky to get that particular process nailed down with patents and stuff like that. So it often doesn't work all that well. Software is a great example of that, where it doesn't work all that well. It might work okay with like a medical device or something, where it's kind of the norms in that industry to get patents. But in software, often users will freely disclose. You could put up a website once you actually get a software developed, and you just have a website that says, help me out. Have a wiki that's there that says, help us out. Help us out with all the different things and what you'd like to see on this. So in each one of those suggestions, you're not going to go and patent that. That doesn't make any sense, right? That clearly doesn't make any sense, because it's constantly changing and evolving, and it's just really difficult to do that. The other way is kind of like this open collaborative type innovation model, where there's like wikis, Wikipedia, for example, open source software, for example, where people can contribute freely whenever they want. If they want to contribute, they can build the thing, they can give suggestions, they can do whatever. It's all just very collaborative, and it's kind of, there is a structure, and I'm not going to get into that, but it's very amorphous and very kind of, it changes on a regular basis of who's contributing, what is actually part of this, what's going on. Like Mozilla, for example, is a classic example of that, where it was just, it's user design, or it's kind of operative collaborative type project where people work on something sort of in a way that anybody can contribute if they want to. There's lots of like Linux or Linux. Is another example where people can contribute and develop the code, and it works really good. And this is kind of interesting, because then you don't know who actually owns and who can actually patent those particular things. And it becomes really difficult if you start asking questions about, how this actually works. So the thing is that the innovation model is completely changing, right? There's a lot more moving towards this particular perspective. There's also, contract manufacturers that are out there with different websites that make it really easy to sort of do modular design, like Upwork.com, for example. You can get people to work on projects independently very quickly and build something very, very quickly, and then it's done, right? So who is actually, obviously the owner of that project owns what is actually built, but then there's other contributors and all this kind of stuff that are part of it that is difficult to sort of specify and to rule out and whatnot, and to sort of define with the patenting system. There's other sort of, if you think of if one way to actually get something developed, you use your own money to actually to develop a particular thing, but then if you collect money from sort of crowdfunding, for example, and lots of people contribute to this particular thing in a crowdfunding effort. Obviously it's the owner that owns that project, but then there's many people that actually contributed to that project in different ways, and there might be actually disputes in the future, litigation disputes, who actually owns that particular thing because people actually contributed with their own finances. So it's really tricky, difficult question at this point of how to actually do the patenting system, and it's rapidly changing. We have to rapidly change the patenting system, and there might be better ways to actually encourage innovation rather than having kind of like a barrier system where people have intellectual property barriers, and to think maybe that there's maybe taxation systems where we reward people in different ways, or maybe we think about perhaps, things like having prizes, right? Prizes that are very, very effective for innovators to encourage people to innovate. I have a video on that if you look at from the past, but there's other sort of ways to, prizes are actually the major innovations have occurred because of prizes that have been put out, or where you have a system in place where you give rewards to very innovators that are out there. So the government gives them sort of not just taxation rewards, but maybe they have the best innovator in certain locations rewards and awards and stuff like that, which governments obviously do, but we can maybe encourage that and develop that system a little bit more rather than having a stronger patenting system because of these particular problems. So that's just something to think about. And these are, I'm just putting this out there. This is not legal advice or anything like that. I'm just putting it out there because I think it's an interesting thought when I was reading the Baldwin and von Hippel article recently, and I was borrowing heavily from some of these ideas from them, but it's really interesting stuff and how things are changing, and that the patenting system, that there is some substantial problems with how things are changing, and the costs associated with patents and stuff like that. So it might be something that we can think about, and whether you want to add some comments and stuff like that, you can mostly for sure you can do that and talk about all these different systems, all these different issues, and whether I'm missing things and stuff like that, because of course I'm missing things with the costs and benefits of the patenting system. So the other thing that you can do, if you want, you could do the old thumbs up with this. If you like this idea, you can do the old that's fine as well. I don't mind. You can go and watch some old videos if you want to help out with reciprocity. The E is spelled with a 3. It's reciprocity.com. The E is spelled with a 3. You can look at the older videos and see what I'm doing with that. I'm trying to help out graduate students as well as have this as a particular resource so I can do some really cool research in this area. And that's really what my goal is with this particular thing. So I'm excited about it, and you could check it out with what I'm doing. And that's all I'm going to say. I wanted to say thank you so much for listening to this particular video and watching this particular video. All of you who subscribed, you're so cool. Appreciate it. You are truly are wonderful. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye.